I'd been on the treatment hamster wheel of I'm going to go to this doctor and this doctor and this doctor and this doctor and try this supplement and this supplement. And like over and over and over again, just this idea of something's got to fix me. I was like, I don't know what else to do at this point. And I was, like you said, I got this point where I was like curled in a ball on my kitchen floor and crying and just telling my wife, like, I just got to kill myself.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Kazazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest is a former Navy SEAL commander. He spent 20 years being a SEAL, and he was shocked to find out that he wasn't mentally fit. He suffered from chronic illness, seen dozens of practitioners, therapists, took thousands of supplements, and it got to such a low point that he nearly took his own life in late 2019. He then went on a journey to become mentally fit, realizing that his mind was at the root cause of his illness, and he started working on reversing the damage that was happening to him. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you guys to Chris Irwin. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you. And, we've had so many SEALs on the show, so I want to kind of skip the beginning. You went into being a SEAL and what that was like. And I kind of want to go into the after of, because I use the word mentally tough a lot, okay? And one of the questions that I ask everyone at the end of the show is, what can we do on a daily basis to be mentally tough? And when I was listening to you and the podcasts that you've been on and stuff, you talked about the word mentally tough. And I would love for you to give us your take on that and to segue that into mentally fit.
I think mental toughness is something, you're right, it's talked about a lot these days, to the point where there's too much emphasis on it. Mental toughness is, you can call it a lot of things. You can call it grit, you can call it perseverance, you can call it tenacity. That idea of just being able to grind through things and like put up with things, that's basically what we're talking about. And that's a very useful skill. And certainly in the context of the military, special operations, whatever, you need to have that skill. I mean, that's what training is all about, is seeing, like, are you tough enough? Not really physically. I mean, it is physical, but like the whole point is like what gets you through is your mental ability to just endure that and keep going and keep going. The problem is that I think we view it as the fix-all for everything. Like any problem you have, the solution is just suck it up, go harder, deal with it. The thing that I kind of came to realize as a veteran was, if so many veterans have, and I'm not saying all veterans have mental health issues, but if some of these statistics about like 22 suicides a day, and certainly we see this, like PTSD and whatever, all of these conditions, if that's afflicting the veteran community, well, why isn't mental toughness getting them out of it? Because all those people are very mentally tough. That's part of the deal, right? Like, we know how to do that. So that's not the answer. So my whole thing with it is there's other tools that you need to develop, because it just doesn't get you out of everything. If you're hypervigilant all the time, if you're struggling with anxiety, I don't know how mental toughness helps you in those circumstances. Because really what you're doing then is you're just ignoring what's going on. Like you're not dealing with it. You're not understanding the process. You're not integrating things that you need to integrate. You're just basically ignoring it and kicking the can down the road. And for some people it can get so bad because they think that they go back to, that's the only solution for me. It's okay, the solution is suck it up. Suck it up, suffer in silence. And I always use the extreme example of, if you are suicidal or getting to that point potentially, or feeling that way at certain times, suck it up and suffer in silence is the worst thing you can do. That's a terrible thing to do at that point. Grinding through or going harder doesn't even make sense to me. I don't even know what that means. It's like, what does that mean? Right? If you're sitting there with you got a point where you got a loaded pistol next to you. What does go harder mean there to get you out of that scenario? Doesn't mean anything, as far as I'm concerned.
You're approaching mental health differently than we are, because mental health is such a big thing, but it's such a broad thing. It's so
Yeah,
broad.
sure.
And the way you said in an interview, the way we are approaching mental health is not right. And you're talking about it right now. And you talked about we need to treat the fitness of the mind the same as we treat the fitness of the body. And you have to commit to it in a long term basis. One thing that you said was it's not like you just get up and go work out and you eat right and you sleep well for one day and then, so can you talk about the fitness of the mind? We understand fitness of the body, it's like going to the gym, moving the body, all that stuff. But now what about fitness of the mind?
When I started kind of looking at this and trying to figure out kind of a better way to approach this, physical fitness is something that I think most people understand, and they understand some very basic things about it. We can argue about exactly how to work out and what to eat and things like that, but we very much kind of agree on, to start, physical health is something that's on a spectrum, right? It is illness to fitness, basically. If you're you can be on the very sort of like very, very fit, or you can be ill, and you can be anywhere along that line. There's certain infinite points that you can be on that line. We understand, though, that it's incumbent upon us to push ourselves towards the fit end, and if we don't do that, we will probably go towards the illness end. It's like you said, it's a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. If you are 200 pounds overweight or bedridden because you've taken such poor care of yourself, you don't go to the gym once and eat one healthy meal and get a good night's sleep and all of a sudden you're fit. No, like there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it takes a lot of time, and you're never done. You don't finish ever. This is what Simon Sinek would call an infinite game. It is, even the fittest people on the planet wake up tomorrow and they put work in to keep themselves in that position, right? But the overarching thing about all of that is that it's a training thing. It's on us. No one fixes our health for us. We can have physical trainers to teach us things. We can have dietitians teach us things there. But it's really, we are the ones who do the work. Even if we go to a physical trainer every day, they're not doing push-ups for you. They're not eating for you. It's all on you, right? And it's a pretty simple model. It is those things. It is what you eat, it is exercise, and it's sleep, basically. There's a lot of other stuff out there now. There's like, red light therapy and cold plunges and sunlight, and all those things are good. But like, honestly, you get like 90% of the way there if you eat well, exercise, and sleep. And we can argue about the finer points of exactly what to eat and everything, but like, ultimately it's like eat healthy, natural food, right? And exercise in some way and get like, but conversely, mental health, we just think of as this binary thing. We have pathologized it where we think of it as, do you have problems or not? Do you have mental health problems? That's what we ask people. Hey, are you having any problems? Do you know somebody that's having problems? And so it's this yes or no thing that right off the bat puts it in this pathology paradigm, right? And so because of that, we view it as a treating thing, like when you're sick, when you're physically sick and you need some kind of treatment. So it's an illness. So it is, because of that, we use terms like illness and disorder. We give people pharmaceuticals or we send them to therapy, but we've taken away all the power of people to impact their own mental health by doing that, right? We said it's a treatment model. It's not up to you. Someone else has to fix you. And it's just not true. In my estimation, it's exactly the same thing as physical health. It's on you to train your way to have a fitter mind. And so I think the mental health as a term, I just think is so broken, so to speak. I just think we need to kind of get rid of it. Granted, we're still on this kind of mental health spectrum, but like the goal is fitness, and we should think of it as a fitness paradigm. The issue is people just don't know what to do. Even if you explain that to them and they go, yeah, got it. Like, how do I do that? Right? Like, I don't know how to do that. But I just think that that paradigm you set up is the reason why people feel so broken and they feel so alone and they feel so powerless. It's the message that we're giving people is that, yeah, you are, instead of making them feel empowered, like, oh, you're not, these things are not diseases. Anxiety is not a disease. There's no anxiety bacteria or anxiety or depression virus or something like that. No, these are like normal reactions to your experiences. What you need to do is figure out how to deal with those reactions appropriately and respond in ways that make you more aware of what's going on, and then ultimately can make you better prepared for those scenarios. It's building that kind of resilience, just like, again, going to the gym. But you have to look at it, like you said, the exact same way. It's like, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong process. There's really no finish line there. You're going to get setbacks. Even the fittest people can get sick, right? You can get sick and it kind of knocks you back a little bit and everything. You recover faster the fitter you are. Same thing. It's like you're going to have mental setbacks, but like the more training you've done, the quicker you bounce back from that.
I love how you talk about the power of healing ourselves, because it also, I remember when I was first working with Coach Mac, part of the program that I was with him for was, I guess like brain, it was like, brain training or whatever it's called. He talked about like the human body and reaction. Now we have like 0.3 seconds before we go into reaction mode. And you have to be able to observe yourself to know like, God, I'm about to react. I mean, that's not a lot of time, you have to be able to stop yourself beforehand and also know like what is going to work for you to deal with that, and deal with whatever is you're thinking or how you're reacting and all that stuff in a positive way. Now, when I was listening to one of your talks, you talked about your thoughts. And I thought this was really interesting because you talked about how your thoughts are not necessarily yours. And can you talk more about that for us? And how do we recognize that? Like, how do we recognize and then how do we change that? Because another thing, and maybe you could bring this into what I'm asking you, is because you went on this journey to heal yourself. So like, was there a specific method that you uncovered where you're like, this is not my thought, this is what I got to do to help myself?
Sure. So let me break down kind of the thought thing. So the foundation of any mental fitness, what I call mind fitness, starts with an awareness of your thoughts. It has to start there. And most people are completely oblivious to this. Now, I go through a series of 7, what I call mind killers, which is basically...
I was actually going to ask you about the 7 mind killers, so I'm glad you brought that up.
So, these are the ways that we essentially sabotage ourselves, our own mental health, to our detriment. And so then I talk about the countermeasures to that. And the foundational one, the very first one, is oblivion, which is just being oblivious to the way thoughts work. We have a base problem with thoughts in general, and that is we use that term to mean two things that are not the same thing. So when we say thoughts, some of that, when we use it, is when we're actively thinking about something, when we're focused on something, we're working on something, we're concentrating. That's thinking about that. And that is an active conscious act. But we also use the term thoughts to describe the chatter, like just the bullshit that shows up in your head at any given moment. And that's what's going on like all the time. The problem is that we don't recognize that and we latch onto those as if they're the same thing as actively thinking about something. And we own those things. So when you talk about thoughts not being ours, I mean, certainly they originate inside us somehow, how we don't exactly even know. But we don't have to own them because we're not actively generating them. And that's the thing most people fail to realize. And the example that the way I break this out is I have a friend who I was kind of talking to about these concepts, and he sent me this meme of a yoga instructor on Instagram. She was saying, or it said, printed on an image, I am not my thoughts, I'm the thinker of my thoughts. And he was like, this is what you're talking about, right? This is great. And I said, well, it's part of the way there, but it's not actually right. You're not the thinker of your thoughts. You're the observer of your thoughts. And he said, well, that makes me feel like I'm not in control of my own thoughts. And I was like, right, that's the point. So it's that disassociation that's so important. So most people think I am my thoughts. Like anything that shows up in my head at any given moment is me, and I have to own that. But once you can sort of turn awareness on that process and realize I'm not thinking, Sam Harris says this, I'm not thinking something before I think it. It just shows up. You don't have to own that at all. You don't have to say that's me. You don't have to say I'm thinking that. You can say I'm noticing that I'm having the thought of buh, 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 buh. So you get this point of just noticing it and being like, I can take that seriously if I want to, if it's useful to me, or I can completely dismiss it. Because from an information stream standpoint, it is no different than a television show or a YouTube video or a social media feed. Like all of that stuff, we are able to disassociate. Well, sometimes people get wrapped up in it pretty bad, but we're able to look at that and say, that's not me. I don't have to pay attention to that. And as a stream of information, but our stream of consciousness, which is the same thing, we have a really tough time with. But you have to look at it that way. It's just a data set. That's it. And you don't have to own it. You just don't.
So what happens when, like you said, you can't control your thoughts, they're just there, right? And we got to observe them, right? What do you do, or what tools do you give others for when the thought is like running over and over and over and over again in their mind, and we're trying to stop it?
So it's okay. So one, if you have that awareness, that's actually a really good step, because most people don't even have that.
Oh.
They don't even realize I'm thinking this thing over and over again, right? So if you get to that point, that's actually a really good step. I mean, this is where having a really basic meditation practice is helpful. And people get off-put by meditation because they think it's for a certain type of person. And I can speak from sort of a, warrior class where there's people who are just like, that's for like hippies and people that's, burn incense, that sit lotus position. And like, that's somebody. It can be, sure, but it doesn't have to be that. And it is also not the practice of calming. The whole point is not to calm your mind at all. It is to notice your mind. So meditation at its root level is you're doing two things that are very simple, but not easy. Right? Simple and easy are not the same thing. You are picking a focal point, whether that is your breath. A lot of meditation practice start with your breath, or your field of vision, something that's in the present though. And even with your eyes closed, you can just focus on the darkness because it's not pure black. Like if you close your eyes, there's a field of vision there. You can notice that.
Yeah.
It can be what you hear, anything that's present that keeps you current. And then you're noticing when your thoughts distract you from that. And it'll happen like that. It'll happen in like 2 seconds for most people. And when you start doing that, you won't notice it for a while. It might be like a minute or more before you go, oh my gosh, I'm not even focusing on what I was supposed to be focusing on. And so you bring it back and then you do it again. And that practice, that repetitive practice of between focusing and noticing when your focus gets distracted is the basis, the core practice of that. Because if you can start to adapt that into just everyday when you're not meditating, when that happens, I'm thinking this thing, you can just go, okay, you can notice that process in real time, right? And then again, you can adopt things where instead of having this notion of, why am I thinking this thing over? I'm noticing that this thought is happening a lot in my mind. That's a key distinction between owning it and not owning it. It'd be like, I noticed that I keep getting fed the same video in the algorithm from Instagram, right? Or YouTube. That's the same thing, right? And again, you don't go, oh, why is this thing sending me? Like you don't, I mean, hopefully you don't get that emotionally invested in the YouTube algorithm. You actually might get a little frustrated of like, why is it doing this? But you don't, it doesn't wind you up that much. And it's the same thing. And then if you need to, you can dive deeper on that. Like, well, why is that? Why is that? That's interesting. So then there's this whole other piece that I talk about of curiosity that of like, that's interesting. What's going on there? And so that's how you can kind of take yourself a little bit down the rabbit hole of figuring out the root of some of these things too, right? Like, so just going from noticing those things to, yeah, I tend to have this feeling a lot, or I tend to have this thought tends to crop up for me a lot. Okay, let me go a little deeper on that then, right? Well, then that would be kind of like the next step of it.
So what like comes after that? After you observe it and you recognize it, because it's still coming
Yeah.
up for me. Like I
Sure.
recognize it, I know it's happening, and then what I do is I will do sometimes I'll do a meditation or I'll do a journal just to get it like out or whatever is
Yep, that's
happening.
beautiful. Yep.
But sometimes it's like right there, especially if like it's something that's completely out of my control. I'm waiting for somebody else to give me a decision for something, and that's what my mind is because I'm so emotionally attached to that decision, and that's the problem in a way. It's like I get emotionally attached. So what can we do to not let those emotions, completely control us? Why how can we not get so attached to the emotions?
There's another sort of base point here that needs to be understood, which is talking about what the mind is. You talk about you talked something about brain health or brain
Yeah,
whatever.
brain chemistry.
And a lot of that gets conflated these days where we talk about, like, there's a lot of emphasis on neuroscience, and these are great things to talk about. And certainly brain health with the veteran community, the military,
Mhm.
or athletes. That's good. We should worry about that. However, they're not the same thing. Your brain and your mind are not the same thing. The analogy I use is, as a musician, as somebody who's played guitar for 30 plus years at this point, the music that a guitar creates and the guitar are not the same thing. I think of your body and your brain as sort of like a musical instrument, call it a guitar, where your body is the wood and everything, and then your brain is like the strings. But your mind is the music, right? So like when someone's playing a guitar, the music that comes out of it is an energy. It's an output, and it's ephemeral. It doesn't stick around. Like, you can't point to it, right? You couldn't like find it. It only lasts in the moment, and then it's gone. That is what your mind is. Your mind is the experience. It's what you think of as you. It's not your brain, though. It is the music. It is the output, the energy. So what you're talking about is an energy. It is not a thing. And so when you talk about emotions are very critical to this piece, because emotions are how we process things energetically. It's how we process our experiences and energetically, and they're necessary. Like, we need them to we need to integrate them correctly, process them correctly to deal with our situations, to deal with the things we come across. When it comes to emotional regulation, the problem with most people is that they don't do that well. We don't emotionally process things. So for a lot of people, it's suppression. This, for me, is one of the mind killers is suppression. But this is especially true for men. Like, we don't allow ourselves to be sad, so we like suppress that. It's like anything that happens to us in our life that should make us sad, allow us to cry, because that is an energetic response that allows our body to release the energy that is created from a sorrowful experience. We don't do anything. We're like, move, like, not comfortable with that, right? I'm not supposed to do that. So it's like you push it in your body, and like it completely disrupts you and dysregulates you, because it doesn't like just go away. It's like now it's stuck in you. And that's one of those sort of woo things that people have a tough time getting over. But I can tell you from my own experience, if you do that for decades, you're going to pay the price later on in life, because your body is going to, like, hook or crook, is going to get that out some way. And so it's the reason why a lot of people end up they overcompensate with anger, right? So they get really angry, because like those emotions are very much, it all goes back to the limbic part of your brain. They all come from there. And so it's essentially a way for you to try to get rid of that. It's like, well, this guy isn't allowing me to be sad, so I'm going to be angry instead, because I can get that out. And then a lot of women do the opposite. Okay with crying, not so good with being angry, not so good with like how to process that. Now that's tricky, because you don't want to just go around yelling, screaming at people, right? That's not good. So there's sort of a curiosity that needs to happen about that, but it's figuring out a way to integrate that and process that correctly, whether that's a communication with somebody or whatever it may be. That's really important. And then the other sort of emotion that gets wrapped into that is fear. So it's sort of like this three-headed monster, as far as I'm concerned, of emotions that tend to screw us up, that tend to be dysregulated: sorrow, sadness, anger, and fear, because they are the most emotionally volatile or energetically volatile emotions that we have, you know. Like, it's easy to be happy. Like, that's fine, right? People have really struggled with that. Like, if you feel happiness coming on, ooh, don't be happy, you know. No one does that. People like to be in love. People like to
Uh,
be proud of things. Like, there's all these emotions that we have that, generally speaking, we're like fine with. But those three we struggle with the most. They're the most damaging physically because of the energy involved with it.
so I want to ask you about your experience when you first recognized this. It was like 2019, you're at your low. Like, how did you recognize, like, okay, like at this point it's just me. I have to figure me out and heal me. And then what steps did you take? Because the thing that it's like the gym. It's like when you start going to the gym, you don't know what's going to work for you, right? And you
Yes, right.
also don't see it until like you are sticking with it consistently, right? So at what point and what stuff did you do and that on a consistent basis that like worked, and was there anything that you abandoned? And at what point, and one more thing to caveat to that, especially when you're starting out, like to get that train going, sometimes it's a lot of energy, and because we're already in this negative place, it's easier to stay in this negative place. So how do you keep that moving, especially when you're not
Yeah.
seeing the results?
Let me talk a little bit about you mentioned this. The process is very bespoke to the individual. I think this is a really important thing. We tend to here's the 12-step program, and if you follow my 5-step thing, like, whatever it may be. That's partially true, but I'm very clear to say that the tools that I implemented and that I espouse now and tell people about, you have to figure out what makeup of that will work for you. In the same way that, again, basically a natural food, single ingredient diet works for everybody, the exact mix of that is unique to the individual, right? Like, some people do better with a little bit more vegetables and a little bit less meat. Some people just eat meat, and that works really well for them. I think that's unique to the individual. Again, there's you can go too far, right? Like, nobody thrives on a diet of Skittles, but there's wiggle room in there. And then the
Mhm.
same thing with working out. Like, there's no right way to work out, really. Like, some people like to run, some people like to swim, some people like to lift weights. No one was go to Michael Phelps and say, "You're doing it wrong, dude. Like, you need to lift more weights and run." Like, no, he's good, right? Like, he's okay, just swimming, basically, or whatever else he does, some adjunct stuff that he does for that. So that's all fine. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like these practices, whether it's meditation and breath work or journaling, or like all of these other visualization, like you have to experiment with these tools and figure out what you need, what you like, what you don't like, all of that. It's a journey of self-discovery. And it doesn't have to be the same over time. It hasn't been for me. It's like, you know what? Okay, I'm pretty good with that now. I should probably spend some time doing this. It can change. Someone can decide one day, you know what, like, I'm sick of running marathons. I'm gonna be a weightlifter now or something like that. That's fine. So when it came to me, I mean, look, I had been through a journey of the treatment. I've been on the treatment hamster wheel of, I'm going to go to this doctor and this doctor and this doctor and this doctor and again, try this supplement and this supplement, and like over and over and over again, just this idea of something's got to fix me. I was like, I don't know what else to do at this point. And I was, like you said, I mean, I got to this point where I was like curled at a ball on my kitchen floor and crying and just telling my wife, like, I just got to kill myself. This is like that day. I I had cried a lot. There was a lot of tears shed, and it made me feel a little better. Not like fix me, but I thought, okay, that's something. maybe I should do some more of that. And I also realized that I wasn't like that all the time. It would like come and go, right? And so comparing to physical health, if you have a broken leg, well, your leg's broken until it heals. It's not like one day, 2 days after you break your leg, you're like, you know what, feels pretty good. I think we can go for a run today. That doesn't work that way. So I just thought, okay, whatever's going on with me is not a permanent thing. If there's pieces of time where I feel perfectly fine, this is a software problem. This is not a hardware problem. And so it was like, well, let's look at the software and stop looking so much at the hardware. And that's kind of what I did. So like, look, this is not a linear process. It is not okay, I was better and that better and that bit. No, it's like sinusoidal with a slow incline. It's like you get kicked back, you get knocked back. And look, people who work out a lot feel that too. It's like there's days where you just sore and I do not want to or you have a workout and you're like, that just sucked. That's the way it is. But it's the slow kind of gradual uptick of this thing that makes the difference. And so I just started experimenting more with that. It was like, I'm going to try some meditation. I'm going to try when I feel like the urge to cry, I'm going to lean into it now. Instead of pushing that back, I'm like going to do the opposite on my own terms, even if that has to be by myself. And I've done that. I have sat in my truck by myself wailing for 15 minutes and realizing the value of that, quite frankly, and realizing too, like, why would I care? No one's seeing me do this. Yeah, I've gotten so comfortable where I'll post videos myself online doing that because I want to give people license to do it. I just think it's valid because it still comes up for me. Look, I still have times where, again, this is a recognition of what your body's trying to do. I'll have something will trigger a little bit of crying out of me, and I'm like, okay, cool, like let it go, and it'll last like 10 seconds, but like there's something that had to process there, and it doesn't even matter what it is. I didn't have to psychoanalyze that, So it was just that. It was like I literally just was like, okay, we're gonna try all this therapies and drugs and everything. It's like, well, let me try everything that's out there with this. Like, let's try all these breathing techniques. Let's try all this meditation stuff. Let's try all these journaling practices. That can be such a big part of your identity. Like your identity can become, when we say this, we say, I have anxiety, right? Like, again, like it's something you contracted, like I have a staph infection. Like, what do you mean you had anxiety? We shouldn't frame it that way. It's like I'm experiencing anxious thoughts that's causing anxious behavior, right? But if I get to the root of those thoughts, I can change that. And part of that, which is probably the hardest part, is believing that you can be. It is acting in a way that is the opposite, because it all starts like what reinforces it is behavior, right? So if like take hypervigilance for as an example, or anxiety. What people tend to do is they like, okay, now I'm an anxious person. I'm like on edge all the time, and I react to that feeling with more anxiety. I literally like just dump gasoline on anxiety by being anxious about the anxiety, right? Like if I have a panic attack, I respond to it by being afraid of the panic attack or fearing I might get a panic attack. So you're literally just like dumping lighter fluid on that. Like you are making it worse. You have to have the exact opposite approach. You have to start believing that one, you don't have those things. Like it's just not even a thing anymore. It's not like it'll go away overnight, but when it starts to happen, you have to just be like, no big deal. Had them before, didn't kill me. Like it's that type of thing. Like you have to, I hate to say it, but like you almost have to live in like make-believe land a little bit for a while. But that's fine, because honestly, your life is kind of make-believe. Like your life is just a mental construct of the world around you. It isn't the world around you, right? It's all like made up in your head. We don't like to think of it that way, but as much as our dreams are totally weird and right, they seem completely real when they're happening. So like in the moment of your waking existence and your dreaming existence, like in that moment is there's no difference between reality and dreaming. like crafting that reality for yourself is so valuable. And I still have to do it. Again, this is not a finite game here. This is an infinite game, a la Science Cynic.
So when you have a client and you're coaching somebody on this, what is now, do you like listen to each individual and then give them like a meditation or breathing, or like how exactly would you, if you had someone come to you for coaching, like what would you give them to just get started?
Typically what I do is at least run through the construct, kind of as I've done here a little bit, right? So like you have to understand the construct and begin with. You have to sort of get past this therapy thing, because what I really want to avoid, again, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed clinical social worker, nothing like that. I don't want to be. And I have respect for those people. And I've been to therapy, right? But a therapist should be a coach. What they should be doing, the best ones out there, is trying to get you out of their office as fast as possible. Not so they can get another client or something like that, but like to get you to understand what you need to do on your own. The same way a physical trainer, some people like to have a physical trainer, and they're just like, I like it, it's crutch, whatever. Like I enjoy their company, it's easier for me, I have the money, whatever. But there should come a point where you don't need the physical trainer. Like, you know what to do, right? You're just kind of like relying on them a little bit as a crutch. And so it's the same thing. My goal with anybody is to get them to understand this stuff, to understand kind of the tools so they can do it on their own, right? Like, it's not a meet with me every week to sort out your problems. Like, no, like you go sort it out. But seriously, like that's what you need to be able to do. So generally speaking, what I'll do is I sort of frame up the construct, and then I go through the mind killers with them, because like that's important. That's like sort of, you have to get the kind of the basics of that and allow that to sort of sink in a little bit, because then there's some self-reflection that has to happen there, self-realization. And then it's like, okay, hey, this came up, I don't quite understand this came up, I don't, like, what can I use here? And then it's kind of going through that. And I've had that with people where they come to me and they're like, hey, I had all this emotional stuff happen, but based on what we talked about, like I realized that this was what was going on. That was really helpful. And like, even just doing this was like, so that's great. That's kind of the thing I want out of that. So it's, yeah, there's kind of like, you have to build a foundation there, just as like if someone was brand new to working out, who'd never done it before, it's like, okay, let's teach you how to do a push-up properly and safely, and a squat, and whatever else. And then it's like, okay, what do we need to work on here? What do you think we need to work on? What are your goals too? I mean, it's unique to the individual.
Now, is there a certain breathing exercise that you start people with, or a meditation that you start them with, or something that you like start somebody on? Or do you say, hey, research this and figure out what works?
I mean, I think anybody, again, you have to start with some kind of awareness practice, which has to be some kind of meditative practice. And again, it does not need to be complex. It doesn't need to be long. It can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, once, twice a day. Like, anything is better than nothing. That's the other piece of it. It's like 5 minutes a day is better than trying to cram an hour on the weekends. That's true with any skill. That's true with exercise. That's true with food. That's true with learning an instrument, right? Like, what helps is consistent practice, even if it's only a few minutes every day, or at least a few times a week. So yeah, I think you have to start with that. Having that awareness is critical. And I do even like, I'll start even more basic than that, where it's like we start with just a doing nothing practice. Like, what does it even feel like to do? We're going to do nothing. You can do nothing for 10 minutes. What does that feel like, right? Like, because people don't do nothing anymore.
Yeah.
We're always doing stuff, and like the drumbeat is do more, get up earlier, go faster, go harder. But that's the name of the game these days. And like I said, there's a piece of that that's important. Like, yeah, hard work will get you hopefully to your goals. It's certainly going to get you closer. But like, there's a balance aspect to that, and there's a reflection aspect, and we just don't take any time to be anymore. And so I'll start as basic as like, you're just going to be for the next 10 minutes. Then let me know what it feels like to be. And then we'll do some focus work where it's like, again, sometimes meditation launches right into like focus on your breathing. Like it gets ahead of itself, I think, if we're sort of the layperson out there. So it's like we're going to do some do nothing. And then, okay, if we're going to have you focus on stuff, well, what does focus even feel like? What's it like to focus? You know, so we'll do a little bit of that, then get into that, the meditation and a thing I called mind priming, which is just, it's not even really a meditation. It's like sort of pre-meditation that you do. It's just mental check-in. So instead of even like, okay, sit, close your eyes, like it's like the transition periods, that's sort of a liminal space between like sleep and waking up, like for 2 minutes before you move what's coming to mind. Like it's the focal point is your thoughts right there. It's not like I'm not going to focus on my breathing and wait for my thoughts to distract me. It's like, what are you thinking? Sorry, don't even use the term thinking. What's cropping up right now? When you wake up, that's a great time to do it, because you'd be surprised how many people maybe you wouldn't be, sabotage their own day every day from the jump. Like as soon as they wake up, it's like sabotage. Like I'm just gonna think something shitty, They don't even realize it. Again, it's that awareness.
For as long as you've been at it, you mentioned it's like this roller coaster, right? It's, so how often is it that you have another low, and how quickly are you able to navigate? Like, is there a specific thing that you do to pull yourself out of that low point?
It totally depends, there's no telling that's life. There's no cadence to it. It's not like, well, okay, it's 5:00. I'm time for my dip in the date or something. You might have a great day. You might have a rougher day. For me these days, it is trying to fall in love with every moment, like regardless of what's happening. And that sounds kind of cheesy, but it is that. It is, okay, anything that I would have thought, oh, I have to do X, whatever. I think a lot of people think that way about most of their day. And I've really put in a lot of effort recently to be like, awesome. This is going to be awesome. Whatever it is, like this Zoom call is going to be kick ass. The most mundane stuff, it's going to be great. And falling in love with that process, I think, has such a marked impact on it, And then even when you have one of those moments, it's like, okay, cool. Like you're in the mind gym now. This is an opportunity to train. So what are you going to use it for? You going to use it for self-pity, or are you going to be like, okay, this is the train opportunity here? I don't subscribe to this idea of like full enlightenment. And I'm always like, no, I mean, like we're humans and you have down moments, and you're going to have regrets, and you're going to have doubt and all of that. But you can definitely get to a place where you bounce back way faster from that. You recognize it. You realize it's fleeting. It's not the end of the world. And things aren't quite as scary as we might make them out to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. My teacher recently said I need to start romanticizing my life. And he's like, you drink coffee in the morning? He's like, I like, no, tea. And he's like, that's the best cup of tea you've ever had every morning. He's like, when you're on that walk, it's the best walk. The sun is shining. He's like, I want you to start like paying attention and romanticizing your life to get out of your head so much, and to be more present in what's going on around you. Because I really feel that when we are present, we are not worrying. We're not in fear. We're not in anxiety. We're not in those emotions, because when we're present, it's like my family always says to me, I'm a little morbid, because something is happening that I start worrying about. I like stop and I'm like, bus could hit me right now. Like, and then what? Then I don't need to worry about that because the bus hit me, right? And they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, I might, like, so then that helps me to like be into the moment to then solve whatever's going on and figure that out. But I want to ask you, what can we do then that you recommend on a daily out of like that? Would you say just awareness? Like, what is the one thing that you feel like we should be focused on to be more mentally fit? Like, we get the whole mental tough, but like, what can we do now for and people don't really talk about mentally fit. They talk about body fit, right? And I get the exercises we talked about, like journaling and meditation and all that stuff, but what is there anything that we didn't touch upon that you feel like you should state that we should work towards to be mentally fit?
Yeah, I mean, you could pick from any number of dozens of things that are like on my website that I kind of take people through of
And that's
again, I
your
think
name, just your name.com?
so rare sense. Yeah, so like the actual Substack that's got all the exercises raresense.com,
Okay.
raresense.com.
And we're gonna link that in
This
the description for
Yeah,
everybody as
and then
well.
my website, chrisirwin.com, has like so all of that as well. I mean, you can walk through all of that. Again, I think it helps to understand the framework to start. That's kind of really important because you need to know the why behind it, right? Like someone can tell you, do these push-ups, eat this. But if you're just doing it as like a robot where you're like, you don't understand why you're doing it, it's not the same thing. Like you need
Mhm.
to understand what's the principles behind this. It just because it'll help you shape the routine, right? But if you want to kind of get into some routine, yeah, I think it's the best times to do some kind of training for me is in some of these gaps in the day are good spots where it's like, look, you can take 5 minutes from this meeting to this meeting, this Zoom call to this Zoom call to do some of this. But having a little bit of time in the morning and or the evening is good as well. I'm a big fan of kind of setting things off in the morning. So like, and these can be short things. The kind of that mind priming exercise, like that's right when you wake up. That's like 2 minutes before your feet hit the ground. That can be very valuable. There's very short journaling things that you can do in the morning. I mean, you can add like a meditation in the morning, which I think is really great. You can add, there's various types of breath work you can add to a morning routine. There's very short journaling exercises like having a gratitude journal, setting a statement of intent for the day. And again, all this is on the website, but any mix of that. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be a slave to it either. It's okay if you don't do it every day. I mean, like, it can change, but you can figure out like 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the morning of some mix of this that can really be beneficial, and
Now,
like,
I just want to ask you a question. How can we judge that this is beneficial and is working if we don't stick if we're not consistent with it?
is your life better, right? Like, is your mental state better? I mean, I can't make that determination for you. Like no one's in charge of your mind other than you. People can't affect your mind. No one can offend you. That's ridiculous. Like, these are choices that you make. Yeah, that's up to you. Like, is it better?
Mm.
Is it, but I still get back to, it really is an awareness. Like the awareness is so critical. If you don't start with that, if you don't have that, none of the other stuff is going to work. How can you tell if you're in a better state if you don't have the awareness about your own mental state to begin with?
I always laugh when I say this. I was a life coach in my 20s. And I would always tell people when I would mention meditation, and then they'd say, "Oh, you can't do it." And I was like, "It's not about shutting your thoughts off. It's about acknowledging them. We're aware of it. We're understanding what's going on
Yes.
to then allow it to move on, But if we're not aware of it, it's just we can't get to the root cause of it. And then I have them come back to me and tell me what you know, we're thinking 24/7. But that's one of the exercises that I used to do with people. And I really think it's always interesting because we are so prone to making excuses right away, when something is uncomfortable or something is challenging or something like that. And what do you say for those people? What do you say to those people that are make those excuses or, do that are in a begrudging mood to do something?
Well, I mean, that's what it is. It's an excuse. It's just like an
Mhm.
excuse to not go to the gym. You can make that excuse if you want. It's not changing the status quo, which is theoretically what you're trying to get out of. So if you're trying to change the status quo, you got to change something, right? Like excuse is not going to do that. That's one of those to each in his own time type of things. It's like, okay, well, let me know when you're done making excuses, kind of. I mean, that's a mentally unfit thing too. Don't tell me you want to change, but then you're not willing to change. Some point the switch just will flip for people or won't. Look, you see this with, it's so hard to do mentally. Like, it's hard to do it in terms of like representing it with some kind of montage, because the physical transformation people go through is like visual and you can see it. These people that like lose 300 pounds and get in shape and everything, right? Like, wow. See, I can watch that and I see that transformation. How that happens mentally for somebody, you can't view. So it's not as sexy and it's kind of hard to like see those results. But either way, it's a decision at some point. It's just a decision. Those people that do that, they just woke up one day and are like, I'm fucking done being this way, right? They made a decision finally. They decide, like, people don't change unless they change themselves. I'm a firm believer in that. No one else is going to change you. You can want that all you want. It doesn't happen until you decide to make change. That's on each one of us as an individual. I mean, you have to be responsible for your own mind. Again, no one else can be.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Yeah, cool. No, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, it was awesome. We're going to put all your information in the description. So if anyone wants to reach out or check out those mindful tools and all the other stuff that you have in there, the framework and everything like that, check it out. For everyone else, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a member of our Substack. It's completely free. You get a bunch of chapters from our podcast. And I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thank you.